The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Boy, oh boy, that music just makes me feel like dancing, kicking up my heels, and having a beer at the bar. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the DataView show. This is episode number 6. I'm your host, Scott Hayes, lifetime IBM champion, IBM DB2 Gold consultant, and today our special guest is Peter Kohlmann, who from his email I learned is a digital technical engagement hybrid data management IBM analytics guru. How are you today, Peter?
Excellent. Thanks for having me on the show, Scott.
It's really great that you're here and able to share with us the information about the new data management console. Before we dive in, I like to ask our guests to share something personal about themselves, a hobby, a family thing, travel, whatever you feel like sharing.
Yeah, sure, Scott. So, as people who know me know, I've been a sailor for probably most of my life. I've had a number of sailboats that we've had around Lake Ontario, and it's definitely something I've always had a passion for. We sold the big boat a little while ago, but I'm probably looking for something a bit smaller in probably starting up next summer. And we've actually moved out to a place now where I've got access to the water. So it's frozen solid right now. For those of you who know what the weather is like up and around Toronto, know we hit about minus 20 centigrade last night. It's a bit of a cold snap, but looking forward to the summer again and getting back out on the water.
That sounds really great. I would tell you my sailboat story, but one, we don't have time, and two, it's way too embarrassing. It ends with me getting badly sunburned. All right, let's move along. This is the required gibberish that IBM asked me to share with everybody. The opinions expressed are that of Scott Hayes and the show guests and do not necessarily reflect that of IBM Corporation or the IBM community. DB2 is a registered trademark of IBM, which is also a registered trademark. We make no claims to any marks belonging to anyone, and this event is being recorded. Replays will be publicly available. Mind your manners. Okay, what's ahead? A couple of news bits. We'll have Peter's awesome presentation on the new data management console. We'll ask a few fun polling questions in the middle of his talk, and then we'll thank people like we always do. Upcoming shows, 9th of January, Thomas Chu and Matthias Funk. DB2, the AI database, and managing data efficiently in a hybrid cloud world. Those are some of the top DB2 people up at the IBM lab. Probably want to pay attention to what they have to say. Ember Crooks is always popular, and she's going to share her real life experiences using HADR in the real world. That's on the 23rd of January. 6th February, we're going to have Buell Duncan on. He's an IBM Vice President of Marketing. We're calling this one Marketing Strategy and Puzzles. Peter, I think this might possibly be the most fun and entertaining show that we'll have of the entire season. We're not going to have DB2 commands and things like that on the show, but it's going to be really interesting. I had a fun talk with Buell. On the 13th of Feb, Jason Tavaloris, also with IBM, AI in BI, augmented intelligence built into IBM Cognos Analytics, and of course, DSM and Data Management Console can be monitoring what Cognos is doing to DB2 databases. It's all beautiful. This all ties together. So sign up for that. That'll be interesting. Learn about Cognos. URLs to visit. Oh, there's the IBM community. If you're not a member yet, go there, sign up, sign in, check out the blogs, the calendar of events, lots of great resources. People are talking about different things in the community. There's a new tool called the Db2 Augmented Data Explorer. You can get a free copy by visiting this URL. The IBM Db2 samples are now on GitHub. You can download the product that Peter's going to show us today, ibm.biz/db2 console. Get yourself a book on using DB2 with JSON here. iDoug, register early and save. I think I saw a tweet today. There's only 6 days left to get the loyalty rate for iDoug in Europe next year. And I thought this was really cool. I learned about this from Al Martin. IBM.com/cloud/Watson Studio/Auto AI. Really cool tool. You just throw some data at it and it tells you stuff about your data that you didn't even know. Check it out. Now let's put Peter on. He's going to share with us the new data management console. Peter, I'm going to make you the presenter. Click that button and we'll see your screen.
Great. Let me know when you can see the presentation first screen.
I now see a beautiful slide. It says IBM Db2 Data Management Console.
Great. Okay, thanks a lot. And thank you everybody for joining. I think we've had really good signups for this. Scott was telling me that this is probably a record for number of signups that we've had so far for this series. So I'm glad to see so many people interested in the new console. This slide deck, I'm just going to go through a few slides, and then I really want to spend most of the time demonstrating and showing you the product in real time. And I'm going to make sure that you have access to resources at the end of the presentation. And as some of you may know me, I've been the offering manager for the Db2 tools for the last, say, 4.5 years. I've actually moved recently into a new role. As Scott mentioned, I'm in digital technical engagement right now, which means that I get to spend my time building samples, demos, doing blogging, and I've been having a blast the last month or so starting to build out a hands-on lab that will be available probably within the next few weeks. Just doing final editorial review, and I'll talk a little bit about that and show you some of that in today's presentation. But I want to make sure at the end of the session that you stick around to the end, because there's going to be resources that you can get. As I was saying to Scott just before we started, I want to make sure that everybody on the call gets access to some toys to play with.
Gifts, free gifts. Everybody gets free gifts. Thanks for joining today. Free presents for everybody.
So if we look at the new data management console, I think a lot of people on the call may have been using the old data server manager, and that's been around for a few years. The Db2 data management console, you'll notice if you go and download it, is at version 3.1. Data Server Manager was at 2.1, and there's a reason that we kept that numbering, because you really need to think about the data management console, despite the fact it has a new name, as just an extension and an evolution of Data Server Manager. That's an important thing to keep in mind as we go forward. This isn't a rip and replace. This really is something that you can take your current Data Server Manager deployment and upgrade it into the data management console. So a couple of things to remember when I talk about the data management console and some of the guiding principles that we've had as we've been building this out is we want this to be walk up and use. That means we've been working very closely with our design teams. We actually have a dedicated team of people both doing research and dedicated design to keep the user interface for Db2, both for monitoring, for running SQL, for object management and manipulation, for all the things that you used to do with Data Server Manager, we're really overhauling it a piece at a time. And you'll see some new user interfaces today, but the goal is to really overhaul the whole interface eventually, and to make it not just faster, but a lot more intuitive and easier to use. The next thing to think about is what we're really building is a strategy that we refer to inside IBM as a common console. So some of you may have heard about the idea of a common SQL engine, the idea that whether you're working with DB2 on premises, or you're working with DB2 on cloud, or you're working with DB2 as part of an on-premises cloud, or something like the IBM data packs, or even as part of our appliances, all of these things run on a common SQL engine. And what we've really been building out is a common console and a common user experience across all of those different versions of the DB2 engine. So whether you get the new console with Db2 Warehouse on cloud, and you get that with your on cloud instance, or you use the new IBM Db2 Data Management Console and you install it yourself and you use it with your Db2 databases on-prem, you're really going to be getting the same kind of experience, whether you're on ground or cloud or anything in between. The other key principle that really you may not notice right away, but I want to make sure that you understand is a huge difference between Data Server Manager and this new console, is something that we took and we started with Db2 Warehouse on cloud, which was building out an API layer. So when we overhauled the console, we made sure that everything that you can do through the user interface, you can do through a RESTful services call. And I'll show you exactly how that works within the demonstration as well. But it's really important to understand that this isn't just a new user interface. This is a new API set for DB2. So whether you want to run SQL, whether you want to list the tables in a database, whether you want to look at the monitoring data from the last couple of months of DB2, or even if you want to change the configuration and the setup of the console itself. All of those things are things that you can actually do through RESTful services calls. And I've been working on some pretty extensive examples on how you can do that yourself. And we're going to have that as part of the hands-on lab, but that comes out shortly as well. So I've been working with DBAs for probably almost 30 years now. I started with DB2 back in version 2, and I've worked on most of the user interfaces and the consoles over that time. And the one thing I've learned from DBAs is they live and die by their scripts. Being able to do something through the user interface is great, but every real DBA that I've worked with has wanted to be able to script up things, whether it's adding tables or doing monitoring, or being able to take a database online or offline. All of those things they want to be able to script. And we've really not just created this new UI and a new set of services, but I believe we've really extended the capabilities of DB2 itself by adding this new API layer. The other thing we've done is we've made sure that this is enterprise ready. So one of the things that I did when I came into work on the Data Server Manager console a number of years ago, when that first came out, the biggest difference between version 1 and version 2 of Data Server Manager was making it enterprise ready. That means that you can configure it in a highly available configuration, that it's ready for being able to integrate into things like SNMP, being able to integrate into the kind of security platforms that you expect on an enterprise platform. And one of the things that we did with Data Server Manager was we published a whole security guide to make sure it was easy to hand off that guide to your secondment in your enterprise to make sure that they could be very comfortable very quickly with the deployment of DSM. And all of those enterprise-ready capabilities we've really brought over to the Data Management Console. Now,
Peter,
yes, sir.
I'm still seeing your second slide. Is that right, or have you been advanced?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I'm
Okay.
still on there going through the bullets, and we're gonna move into the rest of the material in just a minute.
All right. Well, I'll remind everybody, if you have any questions for Peter, use the GoToWebinar question tool, and we'll circle around to those.
Absolutely. Thank you. And the last item, and this is actually a change that we've had between Data Server Manager and the Data Management Console, is always free. So one of the things that we've done with DB2 version 11.5 and with the Data Management Console is we've stopped differentiating between base and enterprise on the console. And right now, no matter what edition of DB2 that you've got, the Data Management Console provides you full capabilities for any edition of DB2. So whether you're using DB2 11.1 Workgroup Edition or you're using any of the new additions for 11.5, all of the capabilities, including historical monitoring, are available with Data Management Console. So we're hoping that that encourages more people to use the Data Management Console without worrying about whether they're licensed or entitled to use all of the capabilities. Great. So let me just move forward to the next slide. Again, just to emphasize, across all of the different offerings, whether it's in Db2 Big SQL, the integrated analytics system, Db2 Warehouse or Warehouse on Cloud, we're really building out this full console that allows you to have that same experience across the board. Now, one of the things that you're actually going to see in the new year is we're going to start supporting with this the enterprise console that we have, or the Db2 Data Management Console that you install on premises, the ability to actually hook that into things like Db2 Warehouse or Db2 on Cloud or Db2 Warehouse on Cloud, so that you can have that one single pane of glass to see all of your databases. We've tested extensively with over 300 databases from a single Db2 Data Management Console. We talked a little bit on that first slide about that same experience from ground to cloud, the ability to have a walk-up and use intuitive interface, and that we want it to be enterprise ready. And on the road to our vision, this is one thing that you're going to see, is that while we have a common code base that we're building across all of these different offerings, you're going to see some of the new capabilities appear on some of the DB2 family offerings first. So something like, for example, the file system disaster recovery widget that you see down in the bottom right of this example, that was rolled out on our appliance form factor on what we refer to as Sailfish internally. That was rolled out earlier this year, and that's the sort of thing that we're hoping to bring into some of our other platforms sometime next year. And of course, the SQL editor was something that we actually built out on Cloud Paks for Data earlier this year with data virtualization. We overhauled the SQL editor, and that's that new SQL editor is something you're going to see in this new management console as well. Now, what we actually GA'd back in October 18th, we GA'd the first Db2 Data Management Enterprise Console. Again, this is installable on your desktop machine or on a centralized server. This is meant to be shared by your whole department. So you install it once, and then you can set this up for multiple users. That allows you to do sharing of information within the system, and I'll demonstrate that in a minute. But it also lets you share things like your SQL scripts. You can see the same monitoring information. And this is deployable on Windows, Linux, Mac OS, and we're going to be delivering also to AIX, Linux on Z, and on Docker, hopefully within around the first quarter of next year. We talked a little bit about the open and extensible development as well that I'll show you. And as I said, no licensing restrictions. And we are going to work and be supported on DB2 10.5 and higher.
Hey, Peter.
Yes, sir.
Some of our audience is in a panic. You know, they're excited about this, and they want to know if this is going to work for DB2 on Z.
That's a great question. So we've actually been working with the DB2 on Z team. They are looking at building on top of this console as a platform and extending out to that. I think maybe we can get somebody from the Z team maybe in a few months to come back and talk about the progress of that project. But I know the development teams have been working closely together, and the hope is that we're going to be able to bring the Z platform into the fold as well sometime in the first half of next year.
Well, very good. Well, we plan to bring you back in the spring, so maybe we can hear from the Z team as well.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to mention this again at the end of the presentation. I know you've put this up as well, but if you want to get started, if you want to download the code today, if you want to take a look at some videos, resources, I've got my blogs that are up here. There are links in here now to some product walkthroughs that I've just posted the other day. And this is where you're going to find the hands-on lab that should be out in the next week or so. So I encourage you to come back often onto ibm.biz/db2 console. This is a community site. I encourage you to post your observations, your feedback, your questions. We love to hear from customers. We've got over 100 registered users of the site right now, and I'm getting about 2 to 3 new users every day, and we'd love to see more people registered and participate in the site and post their feedback. I know the development team watches the feedback site on here and the forums very carefully, and they love to see feedback on this as well. The other area that you might want to take a look at is at ibm.biz/DMC roadmap, because I know there are going to be a lot of questions, including what we had today on what we're doing with Z, and all of the things that we're doing over the next 6 to 12 months to take this new console and get us back to, I'd say, the point with this new architecture and new platform where we're functionally equivalent to what we were doing with Data Server Manager. That whole roadmap is laid out in detail at ibm.biz/DMC roadmap if you want to go take a look there, and any updates are managed there carefully. All right, so let's get into the next part of the show. But while I'm starting this up, let's just see, have there been any questions posted? Or Scott, did you have any other questions before I get into the demonstration?
Looking at questions, are there plans? Yeah, okay. People are asking about the DB2Z. I'm getting past those questions. What are the limits of the console? DSM's performance is starting to suffer around 200 connections, all with basic monitoring. It is almost unusable with 300. Oh, that's a question that's out there.
Sure, let me answer that quickly. So 2 things is, one is, I know the measurements that the development team have been doing on the new console. They've been testing it with over 300 active connections. They tell me that the resources required in memory and in CPU, mostly in the memory footprint requirements, to manage that number of databases is about half on the new console for what it was for DSM. And they've been pushing the system pretty hard to ensure that it's going to stand up to that kind of heavy use, and again, do it a lot more efficiently than the old console was. One thing to keep in mind is Data Server Manager, when it was built, really brought together about 3 or 4 different products. So it brought together the Optimum Performance Manager, it brought together the Configuration Manager, it brought together the Query Workload Tuner, and each one of those tools actually had their own data collection routines that were running, and sometimes they stepped on each other. The redesign that we had of the Data Management Console was actually designed to consolidate all the data collection into one process and to do it a lot more efficiently. So I know the team is really looking forward to seeing customers run this in heavy production use, but they spent a lot of time making sure that this would run a lot more efficiently. Now that said, to answer the other part of the question is, there are a number of things that you can do in terms of the options for what you turn on and off in monitoring that will have an impact on the overhead, both for the database and for the historical database that you're using that may be the bottleneck in your data collection process. So it really depends on the level of monitoring that you turn on. I've actually got an article in my blog site for Data Server Manager that I'll probably revisit with the Data Management Console that talks about how do you measure the overhead of monitoring on your database itself. So that may be something you want to take a look at to use the tools themselves to understand where your bottlenecks in or the overhead in doing monitoring may be today. So a bit of a long answer, but I'm hoping the folks on the call know that it's definitely something that we're striving to expand, because we know the customers have been using DSM, like using it to cover all of the databases in their enterprise. So let me talk a little bit about, yes, sir.
I told you this crowd was excited about learning about DMC, and there's a question about the license here, data enterprise capability. What is this free for all DB2 editions, versions 10.5, version 11, 11.5? Tell us about licensing and compatibility if you don't have a slide on it.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, it is available for and supported for 10.5 and higher, and it is free for use with all DB2 on-premise editions. And we're expecting to extend support out to our on-cloud databases in the new year as well.
Great, thank you.
So this is the main console screen. This is actually a database overview page. What we've done with this, and we actually prototyped this with the appliance consoles that we were using previously, and we've extended this out to the data management console. We've broken the story for each database into 6 different stories. So as I mentioned, I've been a sailor, but I also years ago learned how to fly. I spent about 5 to 6 years just as a private pilot. And the one thing I learned from that experience was that every aircraft, whether it's a small Cessna or the space shuttle, relies on what's called the 6-pack. The 6-pack are 6 key instruments in every aircraft, whether it's altitude, attitude, turn indicator, the airspeed indicator. Those key instruments are core to every single aircraft. And what we did is we said, you know, if we're going to build a 6-pack, if we're going to tell the story of a database succinctly so that you can see these instruments from a single screen and get a view of what's happening in that database really easily on that screen so you can see everything that you need to, what are the 6 stories that we want to tell? And we said, well, there are 3 stories that tell you what's happening outside the database. This database availability, has it been running over the last hour, 6 hours, 24 hours? What's the availability story been like? And are there any alerts that you should be aware of? Then there's the responsiveness. So what does the profile of the responsiveness in the system look like? How many statements have been running over that time period? And what's the histogram look like of how many statements have been running over different periods? And over time, what's the responsiveness of the average response time? Then there's throughput. So how much work is the system actually doing? And we measure that simply by saying how many statements have been running per minute and what's the number of rows read that have been run, in this case, over the last hour. So that's telling you from the outside what's happening with the system. From the inside, we look at CPU usage, memory, log space usage, and storage. Those are going to give you your core resource usage ideas and say, are there any serious bottlenecks? Is there anywhere in the system where I'm just running out of resources and I need to take attention to that? And also in database contention, do I have an excessive number of lock weights? How many users are currently connected to the system? And then finally, how am I spending my time in the database? And that's broken down, as you can see here, by am I spending my time processing SQL, waiting for I/O, other weights. We really hope, and the feedback we've had from DBAs is this view of these 6 stories really at a glance will tell you what's going on with the database. Do I have a system that's running transactions where I'm running millions of transactions an hour, and my average response time is very fast? Do I have high throughput levels? Am I blocked by high levels of contention? Am I blocked because I've got a CPU? I'm blocked by CPU. Am I waiting just for I/O because I should be buffering better? At a high level, we really feel that the DBAs can at a glance see what's happening with one database system. More than that, what we've done is we've brought this up to a level. Let me just zoom in a little bit on this. We've set this up so that you can manage hundreds of databases from a single screen. I've just got 2 in this sample system. This is actually the playground or the hands-on lab that we're going to be publishing in about another week or so. You'll be able to sign on for an 8-hour period where you can come in and try the labs. You can play around with DSM, you can run some workloads and see how the system's running. And this is all free of charge. You can come in once you've registered the system and use it and play around with it without having to install anything. And you can see in here what we've done is we've actually aggregated those 6 stories, whether we have any alerts on our availability or performance, responsiveness, throughput, resource usage, contention, and time spent. And we've summarized those so you can see that summary for one database in one line. And in this case, as you fly over each of these, you'll see a little thumbnail sketch of each one of these and decide if there's one of these databases you want to drill down on. You can change the time period for this. So say I want to get a summary over the last 12 hours, the last hour, and really see that across the board. And you can start to organize these. So if you're one of those users that are managing hundreds of databases, you can create dynamic filters. And these will actually change depending on the detail that's coming up within your system. So I can take a look at, let's say, my response time and say I want to take a look at just everything that has a response time greater than 500 milliseconds. You can see how it'll automatically going to sort and organize that. I can create those filters in here. And I can also tag databases as well. So if I've got a database that I want to take a look at, I can click on the tag. I can add a new tag in here or select an existing tag. And I can mark that one as a hot database. And if I go to my tags here, I can say, just show me all the hot systems that I want to take a look at. So it's really easy to organize either by dynamic filters or by tagging your system. And at a glance, you can also see databases that are running above or below normal. The little 3 bars that you see beside rose red here are showing that this is actually running above normal. We measure a baseline. It's sort of it might be hard to see on the screen share, but the baseline will show you what the system normally runs at, and you can see we're running a lot hotter than normal. We're actually running 3 statistical deviations above the norm on this system, which is why we get the little 3 bars. And you can actually see whether response time is higher or lower than normal as well, the number of connections. And once you see a database that you're interested in, just click on it, and that's going to take you into that detailed history that we were taking a look at before. Sorry, just zoom back in a little bit on that so we can see that screen as well. Now from here, we can actually drill down again. So I pick the database I'm interested, I can look at the high-level screen, and I want to get some detail on my database responsiveness. So from here, I've done the additional step before we got here of taking a look at my individual executions. And what we've done in the background for you is set up an event monitor so we can keep track of the actual individual statements that have been running on the system. I've been running some workloads on this system before our session started today. And you can see I've actually grouped some of the statements that have been running on the system. I get an idea of the average number of rows read every time the statements run, how many rows were returned, And I can actually look at how many times each one of these statements have been executed as well over the time period. And I can zoom down and pick the time period that I'm interested in for that. And I can even group this information by my WLM workload and say, just show me the statements by WLM workload, and I can get more detailed information on that as well. Again, I can break this down in a lot of different ways. Now, once I've found a statement that I'm interested in, or there's a particular run I want to take a look at more detail on, I can get more detail on that specific statement by looking at the details in here, or I can do a visual explain on this as well. And I'll show you what that looks like in a minute as well. The details will just give me a lot of detail on exactly what happened when that statement ran. So I can take a look at the query. I can look at any sorts that happened in the system, locking, the number of rows read, the IOs, even details on federation, on remote table calls as well. So within the monitoring space, there's a lot of other monitoring detail, and actually every drop, we're expecting to add more to this. In the January drop that we're expecting to come out in January, you'll see more detail that's being added to this. I showed you the individual executions. You can look at in-flight executions and see what's running right now. We can take a look at the package cache history, detail on store procedures, and we can even look at things like down to buffer pool history. So let's go take a look at what happened with a particular buffer pool over the last 6 hours. I'm going to take a look at my default buffer pool, and I can actually go look at the details, and this will actually give me a detailed history of that buffer pool. So I can take a look at my logical versus physical reads, my direct write level, and I can break this down by detail as well. So one of the things that you'll notice that's really different between what we're doing here and what we did in Data Server Manager. Data Server Manager, there was always real-time and historical. And what we've built into the user interface to make it easier to navigate is really everything has a continuum between the latest information and our historical details. So you don't have to navigate or switch between two modes anymore. What we've really done is combine that information into a continuous stream of either the latest snapshot or that full history. And you can take a look at that and drill down into it in a lot of different ways. Within monitoring as well, one of the things that we've added that was requested by a lot of users was also the ability to monitor storage. And we can take a look at that either by tables or by schema, and actually take a look at that storage history as well. So that data is something that wasn't in Data Server Manager before, and we can actually take a look at that history in detail. I just created this table a couple hours ago, so there's not a lot of history in the table, but it will give you an idea of that storage usage. We can really get down to a detail level for that as well. I'm just going to pause for a second and see if there are any more questions that have come up.
There are some questions, and I have a couple of polling questions. I think your audio quality is somewhere between okay and good. There's, you know, you're running a workload on your machine, right? And then you're also doing the GoToWebinar and using voice over IP. And the CPU consumption of your workload might be interfering with your audio quality. I was wondering if you have a phone at the desk where you are, what would happen if you switched to a phone line?
I could try the phone. The workloads, as you can see, is actually finished. So that may hopefully be helping. I'll sit a little, sometimes the Bluetooth works a bit better if I'm sitting closer. So let me know if the audio quality is good. If not, I will try, and I can try and call in with my my cell phone as well. And then I'll switch head.
I think it's good. It's gotten better recently. So let's ask one of the questions here. Do we can build our own charts with DMC? Can we build our own charts with DMC is what Joachim wants to know.
Sure, let me hold that question for just a minute. I'm going to show you a couple more things, and then I'll show you exactly what we're doing for that to open up the console. I'm going to go through two other sections really quickly, and then I'll drop into that. And I promise I'll answer that with some of the works we're doing, especially with Python notebooks.
Well, let's ask a couple of our polling questions and let you take a drink of your favorite beverage, and then we'll circle back here. Polls. Oh, our first question is just a fun question. Asking people, it's the holidays, if they've been naughty or nice this year. We try to get 80% of our audience to respond, or 30 seconds, whichever comes first. All right, I got some honest people out there. I've got some responses for naughty. Ho ho ho. Anybody else care to give an opinion? We will be reporting this information to Santa Claus, so if you're hoping to get some gifts, hopefully you've checked nice. Going once, going twice, closing the poll, sharing the results. Here's the scoop on today's audience, Peter. 50% say both, 47% nice, 3% naughty. Another polling question. Do you currently use IBM DSM? So there's no, and then there's 3 yes answers, where people can kind of critique it. Okay, 83% have voted. Good job, guys. Closing the poll, sharing the results. Half of our audience has not yet used or not currently using DSM. 26% say yes, it could be better. 23% say yes, it's okay. Nobody gave you a great on DSM. All right, next question. Have you tried the new Data Management Console? Hey, we're getting some greats on this one. That's the good news. Are you a coffee drinker, tea drinker, water drinker? What's your go-to beverage during the workday?
All of the above.
All the above. All right. 81% have voted. Closing the poll, sharing the results. 79% have not yet tried it. 12% saying yes, and it could be better. 5 and 5 say it's okay and it's great. So I think we need to get more people trying it. Download it, try it, join the IBM community, and get into the Data Management Console group. There's great discussions taking place there where the team has been very responsive to feedback. Let's see if I have another question at this time. Last question. What tools are you currently using? There's DSM or the new DMC, IT Gain, TBI Software, Quest, others. Kind of get a landscape of the tools here. Got some high performance people in our studio audience. I've never seen such fast voting. Thank you all for your participation in the polling questions. Going once, going twice, closing the poll and sharing the results. 39% DSM or DMC, 5% IT Gain, 15% DBI Software, 17% Quest, and 56% others. Now, it's too bad that GoToWebinar limits me to 5 polling responses. I probably could have put others in there, but that's good to know. For those that are using other tools, when today's show ends, There is a survey where you can provide feedback. I'm curious to learn what other tools that you are using. I'm going to do the State of the DB2 Universe Worldwide Study again, and I want to make sure I include everybody's favorite tools in that survey. Okay. Peter, you're back on the air.
Excellent, thank you. So as some of you may have noticed, I've pulled up the SQL editor that's part of the new Data Management Console. As you can see, we can run multiple statements through this. We can actually run a statement. You can run statements and export the results to a spreadsheet. You can run from cursor, you can run selected, but one of the things that you can do that's integrated in here as well is you can select the statement and explain it, which I've done over here. And you can see the visual explain is an interactive environment that you can work with. I can take a look and see exactly what's happening within each step. I can rearrange this. I can zoom in and out with a couple of fingers. And I can even see the original and the DB2 rewritten statement as well from here. But one of the really nice things that you may have noticed in the new console that is in here and is also throughout the full interface is something called Share This Page. So you see the little interconnected logo with the three circles with lines between them. If you click on that, and this is something that's throughout the full interface now, basically almost every page in the interface has this Share the Page section. Now I can take this URL, I can copy that to a clipboard, and then I can send that URL to somebody else who has permission to see the console, and they can now go take a look at that visual explain that I just did. So you can imagine if you want to put this into a Git issue, if you want to just email it to a friend and say, hey, there's a SQL statement that's been bothering me, I'm trying to figure out how we can improve this, go take a look at the visual explain. And they won't just get a static document, they're going to get a link to this interactive environment that they can work with and actually browse down, zoom in, or zoom out on different parts. If it's a really complicated SQL, they can actually collapse different parts to work with. So it's a new way of sharing things within the interface as well. Now, we were talking a little bit about reports, and I'm going to show you some examples of that. But let's say you want to create your own report or even your own web page. And you want to take a look at what my in-flight executions were for a particular point in time. I don't think I've got anything in flight right now, but you'll notice I can pick, let's say, the last 6 hours and take a look at what was, what I recorded as in-flight statements over that time. And I can create a link to this. I can, of course, send that to somebody, but I can also click on this HTML link. I can copy this, and I can actually drop that right into a web page and drop that iframe in. And it's not just about creating static reports. I can actually create my own dynamic web page and include the different pieces of the user interface that I want to create my own web page. I've got some examples of how to do that in the overview videos as well. So it really opens this up. It's not just...
That's an ooh and an ah and ooh, that's cool. Yeah. I think that's cool.
Now, and again, other things that we have in here, we have the whole ability to explore objects. So for example, if I want to go take a look at the tables in this particular database, I can go and search through here. I can pick that employee table. I can view the data in that employee table. And you'll notice I got a share link on here as well. So I can actually go and share that. Now, the other thing to understand too is we've got these URLs. If you see the URLs across the interface, you can take this URL and drop it into another page and navigate to exactly this place in the user interface. There's some really interesting applications of that because there's a little trick that I'm going to show you guys that allows you to take this part of the user interface and embed it in something else without the full UI around it. Just use it as a bit of a microservice. So I'm going to show you a notebook that's going to be part of this lab that's coming out. So for those of you who've used Python notebooks, we actually have a lab that's coming out. It's going to show you, give you introduction to using Jupyter Python notebooks with DB2, using these DB2 magic commands that George Backlars has written to make using Python a lot easier with direct connection to DB2. How to use SQL with RESTful services to run SQL. And then the two that I've added on here is using the RESTful services layer that we talked about in the console and being able to use that to automate things within DB2 itself. And this is where I want to go when we talk about can you build your own reports. We're going to be showing you examples of how you can pull the data right out of the console using some of these RESTful services and build your own Python reports, not just to get data, but to actually do analysis of that monitoring data as well. And the other one that I built here is for analyzing SQL workloads. So I show you not just how to run one SQL, but how to run a script multiple times against multiple databases, and then measure the results of those scripts. And you saw the workloads I was running earlier today that was generating the kind of overhead within the database systems that you saw here. I was actually running that with these Jupyter notebooks and generating that work in the background. And that's going to be all part of these hands-on labs. So for example, the runs that I was doing while this was going on in the background at the front of the call, I had run multiple statements, basically through about 50 different reps, repeating each of the scripts 5 times against these 2 different databases, and then analyzing and measuring the results to see what statement, which of the 2 databases ran faster or slower across these different systems. And if we're looking at this automate one, there are a couple of classes that we've built here to make this really easy for you to do. It's one step to connect to a database, say which database connection you're working with. As soon as you've connected using the RESTful service, I can run a simple call here, which actually is going to return a JSON data set that's telling me what database I'm connected to, what the license type of the database is, who the owner is that we're connected to, what the port is, what edition of DB2 that we're talking to. And then I can start to do interesting stuff. Now, one of the first things I can do, remember I showed you the ability to go and navigate through different objects. I can actually run this little iframe call, which is creating a URL, dropping it into an iframe right in my Python notebook. And it's letting me actually use this part of the interface embedded inside my Python notebook. Now I'll show you some interesting applications of that as we go down here. Now I can also call that RESTful service call as part of the UI, and I'm calling that directly here. And the call I'm saying is go get me that list of the schemas that are in this database. So this gets a lot more interesting. Remember that top level page that I had? I can actually embed that inside my Python notebook, and you can see I've got an interactive interface dropped right inside my Python notebook. And now I can go and grab that same data, and I'm going to go and grab the data that you can see was part, and I'm going to graph it. See, that's a graph of my CPU time, or sorry, this was my number of rows read. So if I'm looking at this interface, I can take a look at my rows read graph by embedding that, or I can actually pull that data by making a RESTful services call, and I get a JSON data set back that I've graphed here. It gives me exactly that same data that I'm seeing through the user interface. So I can take that, I can analyze it, I can start dropping this into all kinds of analytics systems as well if I want to start mapping that. Something like storage used, for example, I can pull out my storage user interface, drop it in my Python notebook, or I can run that RESTful services call and get a view by schema of how much storage is being used in each database. Things like object management. So if I want to search for certain things, I can get that information back. And I can even do statement monitoring. In this case, I was taking a look at the package cache. I got results back on that. What's in the package cache? What are my connections that I've had over a period of time? In this case, I've actually been graphing how much storage I've been using in my repository database. And I'm taking a look at the growth of my monitoring history data as well. Just to give you some ideas on how we can combine some of these things in some really interesting ways. Now, one thing that's really cool that we put into the SQL analysis workshop, and I just want to show you quickly, is I can actually take a statement that I'm interested in. I can drop that in and create a URL, and I can pass in the SQL statement in that URL. Just trying to find the right piece here. All right, I think I just ran across it. And what I can actually do is pull up a visual explain of that statement. Here we go. Okay, that's package cache. And here's a visual explain. So I'm actually passing a statement in here. I've analyzed this and figured out what my slowest running statement is on the system. And I can actually generate a visual explain and drop it in here. Sorry guys, I didn't run the statements ahead of this. It's going to take a little long to do the full analysis. Not to take my word for it, but I can actually drop a full visual explain right in here as part of the full of what we're doing. So the one big takeaway I want to make sure everybody gets from this is, this is a full UI, but it's really a set of RESTful services. And if you want to see where that's documented, right in the user interface itself, there's documentation for the REST APIs, as well as all the examples that we've been building out. And you'll see that within the documentation. There are micro examples for each one of the APIs that are available here, whether it's monitoring data, whether it's running SQL, setting up the system itself, being able to look at database objects. All of these kind of things within the system are basically straightforward calls. And whether you want to call that through Python or curl, which is a command line utility that you can use, you can access everything through the UI and you can script that up. Now, and again, just the last point is to come to that IBM Biz/Db2 console. You're going to see frequently asked questions in here. You can download their setup videos and installation instructions or product walkthroughs, and we're going to have that hands-on lab in here, hopefully within the next week or so as well.
All right, well, the question queue has blown up. You've got people excited. Does it run on Windows 2016? You mentioned some other platforms. Does it run on Windows 2016?
I'll have to take a look. I think it does. That's something we'll have to double check, and I'll try and put that up into the frequently asked questions. I'll add it in there. I know it does run on Mac as well, but we'll check the actual levels of Windows that are supported as well. And if it's not in here already, I'll make sure that we get that added in here.
Miguel would like to know, how does DMC manage the history? Does it need a dedicated disk storage? Do we have to prune it manually? Any performance impact?
That's a great question. Yeah, so we do require that you have a Db2 database to manage the history. The license for that is included. You don't have to pay extra for that, and that's fully supported. And we do actually auto prune what's happening within the repository. So if you come in and take a look at the settings, the monitoring profiles, so each database or groups of databases will have monitoring profiles that you can actually change the settings for that to say exactly how long do you want to keep data for, and we automatically prune all that data. So whether you want to keep data for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, you have the ability to really configure how much data that you want to collect over time. And customers we've talked to say that the data typically, without a box settings, will settle in around a few, between 1 and 2 gigs per database if left over a couple of months with the auto pruning. But you can tune this up and down however you like.
Very good, Peter. Raghu would like to know, WLM is not included with non-advanced versions of DB2 prior to 11.5. How does this tool get the data from WLM event monitors in pre-11.5 versions of DB2? And there's some functionality compromise between the different versions of DB2.
So workload management and the ability, so every DB2 database contains 2 default workloads. Now, pre-11.5, you had to be on an advanced edition to be able to define your own workloads. But with version 11.5, the ability to create your own workloads is included for all editions. So we are encouraging customers to move up because they get that at no charge. But you always will get 2 default workloads, and we can monitor those workloads explicitly with the Data Server Manager or the new Data Management Console. Within the console itself, we actually break down the ability to look at things by workload. There was more detail in Data Server Manager, and that is actually coming back to the Data Management Console to be able to see details by workload. That's coming back in the January update.
All right, George would like to know, in some databases where we use the analytics feature, we suffer about sort heap issues. Is there any way to know or monitor sort heap per consumer and the whole sort heap shared threshold? How would you help somebody sort out sorting issues?
So we do take a look at under time spent. You can see whether how much time you're spending in sorts. Certainly looking at Visual Explain, you can see where you're spending time on sorts. But for a monitoring, one of the things that we want to bring back into this, and we had with Data Server Manager, was the ability to do detailed memory monitoring. So you can see when the sort heap is becoming a problem and you're starting to get sort overflows out of the heap, and be able to see that historical data. That was something we had in DSM, and we are planning on bringing back into the DMC as we complete the full set of monitoring capabilities and historical monitoring capabilities as well. But certainly using things like Visual Explain and time spent are also good ways of taking a look at that. That actually may be a great lab that I can take a look at working on in my new role. And I'm really looking for customers to be able to throw some scenarios at me, whether you do that through the community or email them to me directly. I'm looking for great scenarios that we can add into the hands-on lab to give people some practical examples on how to use the console as well.
That's a pretty cool answer, and I'll add for George and everybody else. No matter what tool I'm using, or if I have no tools at all, if you want to figure out who some of your top temp space or sort heap users might be, I look for select statements that have a high number of rows written, because a select statement you're going to see the monitoring elements for rows written increase and be large numbers when a select statement is writing to temp space. And that means if you're writing to temp space, you've overflowed the sort heap and you're actually using a temp space. So look for select statements with a high number of rows written to find your sort consumers. Next question. You already answered that one. We're mostly using DSM for management job scheduling now. I believe the latter is not available in DMC. When is it going to be? Job scheduling.
So if you take a look at the roadmap, I think that's planned to roll out before the middle of next year to be able to do the job scheduling and to be able to manage that. If I remember the URL for that, we had that up earlier. That was at IBM DMC roadmap. Let's see if I remember that correctly. Now, if that does come up properly under AHA, you should be able to find stuff like job scheduling and being able to run jobs within the roadmap as well.
And Luke is very inquisitive. Are there monitoring profiles adjustable as in DSM? DSM had capacity,
yes.
planning chart. Okay.
Yep, definitely the monitoring profiles are adjustable. We've actually simplified, so you don't, you have fewer choices, but we've actually broken it down to make the choices that you're looking at a lot easier to set up and a lot easier to manage. The other thing we didn't mention today was alerts. So we have about 30 to 40% of the previous alerts that we've had. We've added in more. We are going to be adding in more alerts with every drop, about every 3 months. And we've started to add in some more detail on the statement level alerts that I wasn't able to demonstrate today, but definitely something to look out for as well.
Cool. And we have an answer from our audience on Windows 2016. Samuel says, yes, it does work on 2016. I'm running on it now. So you don't have to research that, Peter. Yeah, see, this is what community is all about. Asked and answered. Do you have email notification integration from Jean Bernard?
That's coming in January. I actually reviewed a walkthrough with the development team on that the other day. So they're adding email as well as SNMP alerts. And the other thing to remember is all of the alerts that we have, as well as SNMP and email, are all available through RESTful services as well. So if you want to write your own code to access alerts, that's something that you can actually already do today.
And I think we'll ask one more question. Oh, I hope I don't mess up this name. Arakiasami. Can we capture the host variable values using DMC?
Yes, you can. So if you're talking about, are you talking about parameter marker replacement values? Yes, you can do that. There's an option for that within the monitoring profile of whether you turn that on or off. We have a lot of customers who explicitly won't say parameter marker values because they consider it a security issue and they don't want to collect it, but other customers would really like to see that information because it helps them diagnose more detailed problems. That's absolutely an option.
Okay, and we are currently asking our very good-looking audience, most of them being nice or a little bit of both, if they learned anything today. And since this is a new offering, I think the percentage of yeses is going to be pretty high. It's my prediction. Couple more seconds to go. Need a couple more people to click on a vote. Going once, going twice, closing the poll, sharing the results. And this is what makes me happy because my mission is to share education. And 100% of our audience learned something from you today, Peter. Congratulations. That's great. And I think that we've already been asking questions. So with our gratitude. Thank you very much, audience, for being here. Without an audience, it just wouldn't be as much fun. Thank you, Peter, for sharing your knowledge and the demonstration. Thank you to our sponsors, the IBM community. Make sure you're going to ibm.com/community and getting involved. And everybody always wants to know, where do I find the replays? Well, go to dataviewshow.com/news with another little slash. I think that last slash is optional, but that'll get you to the blogs on the site where we have all of the replays. Okay, so that's where you can go for replays. And this is the last show of 2019. The holidays are just around the corner. I wish everybody a very Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and other religious holidays. If you celebrate those, that's fine. We're good to everybody. Peter, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, and send me an email with any URLs that you'd like me to share in the replay blog. I'll make sure those are easy for people to find. That's it. Bye, everybody.